Hello, and welcome to our workshop on how to be an emotionally intelligent relational leader, building trust through vulnerability and connection. My name is Joshua Snyder, and I will be your facilitator for today. I will note that this presentation has been designed for the development of church leaders, as well as the students enrolled in the Relational Leadership course. In this workshop, we will explore how emotional intelligence, combined with trust and vulnerability, transforms the way we connect with others as leaders. Grounded in practical wisdom and biblical truth, this session aims to inspire us to lead with greater authenticity and effectiveness. Okay, here's our agenda. So we'll begin with biblical foundation, move on to victim or victor video, why emotional intelligence matters, our emotional intelligence assessment test, building trust with emotional intelligence. We'll go into our first activity, which will be the trust ladder, then common barriers to relational leadership, then to our second activity, which is delegation analysis. We'll move on to Jesus as the model relational leader. Activity 3, which will be our trust assessment. Then we'll discuss HBR articles, and then we'll close out with our closing reflections. Relational leadership is deeply biblical. As Philippians remind us, we are called to value others and lead with humility. Paul's admission of weakness in 2 Corinthians, it emphasizes that vulnerability is not a flaw, but a strength through which God's power shines. When we lead with emotional intelligence and faith, we model Christ's example. Nick Shell is a certified Enneagram coach with Cloverleaf. Not only are we Enneagram twins type 9 wing 8s, which are considered walking contradictions, but we both choose to live as victors by the teachings of Jesus Christ. Let's watch Nick Shell's brief video and ask yourself, are you a victim or a victor? At this time, pause the presentation and watch Nick's video. So, which are you, victim or victor? Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and manage our own emotions while understanding and influencing the emotions of others. Leaders with high emotional intelligence are better equipped to foster trust, connection, and engagement in their teams. It's about showing up authentically and making others feel valued. The Global Emotional Intelligence Test uses 40 questions which are derived from the Global Emotional Intelligence Capability Assessment Instrument, which contains 158 items. These are based on Goleman's 4-quadrant emotional intelligence competency model. Please take this time and pause this presentation after listening to these instructions. Using the QR code or link provided, answer each question of the assessment. Afterwards, click on the Score Test button and see how your score reflects within each of the emotional intelligence quadrants. This should take about 10 to 12 minutes. Please return to this presentation once complete. You may begin. So, were you surprised by the results? Or was it what you expected? Either way, this is merely a guide to which emotional intelligent areas you're doing well in and those which perhaps you need to focus on for further development. Trust is cultivated when leaders are transparent, empathetic, consistent, and willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability, in particular, shows strength in admitting that we don't have all the answers. So just as Christ modeled in his reliance, all right, his reliance on the Father, we must model this as well as leaders. So, story time. Back in 2005, I was deployed to Iraq, and I was placed in a platoon of just different people, different backgrounds, come from all these different places and walks of life. And through time, through the pressure that we were put in to operate, I was deployed as convoy security. So my job was to go out on missions every day, getting items, valuable items, food, water, medical supplies to individuals throughout Baghdad. And I had these individuals that I did not know, and I had leadership that I did not know, because we all volunteered to do this job. My job wasn't a driver, a gunner, any of these things, but I made the decision that I wanted to deploy, and so we had all these people with different walks of life. But I want to share this story with you because I want you to understand what it means to build trust with emotional intelligence. And as you can tell from this picture, emotional intelligence is pretty much the brain and the heart connecting and understanding, together. Okay, and that's how I felt at that time in Iraq. I had all these people that I decided that I was going to be transparent with, that I was going to show empathy towards, that I was going to be consistent with, that I was going to be vulnerable to. And it built the relationship, it built the trust necessary to go out on these missions every day. Very dangerous work to go out on these missions. IEDs going off, small arms fire, almost every night. And it built that trust. I had to have that type of trust in those individuals. We couldn't hold back on our fears or what we were concerned with or the things that were going back at home, but we felt the need to trust in each other and to be consistent with one another, and it worked. Over 150 of us returned back to the States. No injuries, no fatalities. And I credit a lot of that to trusting the individual to my right and my left. And so I hope that this small story in some way helped you to come to grips with the understanding that trust has to be built, and it can be built with emotional intelligence. We have reached our first activity of the workshop, the trust ladder. So our objective here is reflect on personal vulnerability and its impact on building trust. I want us to write down a moment when you showed vulnerability to a colleague or a team member. And this could be asking for help, it could be admitting to a mistake, or sharing a personal story. Afterwards, answer the following questions. How did the other person respond to your vulnerability? Did your relationship improve as a result? Why or why not? Please pause this presentation and complete this activity. It should take no longer than 10 minutes. Afterwards, return to the presentation. You may begin. Thank you for completing the activity. If you feel comfortable, please share your responses along with your feedback after the workshop. Even with good intentions, leaders can unintentionally erode trust through behaviors like micromanagement or avoiding vulnerability. To overcome these barriers, we must reflect on our leadership habits and their impact on those we lead. Story time. So back in about 2002, just as a means to show vulnerability here, I was going through a very difficult time in my life. Back in 2002, I lost my son, my first child. 4 days after he was born, he passed away. He was preemie. And I was going through a transition where I was leaving one unit and going to another unit. So I was getting a whole new, whole new leadership, new unit. And I had this new Sergeant Jones, and he was my new squad leader. And I recognized him by his tag. It was name tag. It said Jones, and I hadn't seen him. This was the first time seeing him, and they just told me, "Hey, Sergeant Jones is your squad leader." I walked up to him and I said, "Excuse me, Sergeant Jones?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm Specialist Snyder. I'm your new soldier just transferred in, and I went and to shake his hand. I had my hand out. He looked at my hand, then he looked at me, and then he walked away. And I was confused. He called out for a squad, his first squad, everybody on me. And we all walked over to him. And, we locked up and into parade rest as a show of respect, as he went on to explain to us how he expected us to respond to his leadership. And it was one in which I come to find out in the following weeks was one to where we were completely micromanaged, where he showed no type of vulnerability in giving us experiences of how he was as a soldier, or how we could build ourselves, anything of that area. I mean, of that nature. I mean, it was really tough to see him as a relational leader, even before I knew what this term was. I just knew that I had leadership from before, and I felt confident in their ability to lead me because they would share themselves, they would share their life and their experiences to kind of help build me as a soldier. And I'm telling you, that stayed with me. Further on in this story is that I was really, like I said, riddled with issues and problems emotionally because of the loss of my son. And I talked to Sergeant Jones, and I shared with him, Sergeant Jones, I really feel like I need to go and talk to someone about how I'm feeling. I want to go. And I didn't tell him why, because like I said, I didn't have that relationship with him. I didn't tell him why I needed to talk to someone, but I told him I need to go to behavioral health. I need to go talk to someone going through some things. He said, that doesn't matter. I need you at work. And I mean, I'm telling you, it eroded every bit of what I felt about this sergeant, about this leader. And I requested to talk to higher leadership, higher management, and they rectified the issue, but that stayed with me. It stayed with me the course of my military career, and it stood as the basis of how I would treat my leader, how I would treat my subordinates, those individuals that worked with me on my teams. It just, I wanted to be a relational leader. I wanted to share with them things in my life that they could compare their life to and build themselves upon my past issues, my past failures that became successes. And so as leaders, as emotional leaders, we need to ensure that we avoid these barriers that could alienate us from those people that we should be caring about the most when it comes to support within teamwork, within our teams, within our subordinates. Yes, we have reached our second activity of the workshop, our delegation analysis. So, our objective here, we want to examine our delegation practices to identify areas for improvement. We're going to do this by listing a task or responsibility that you currently handle that can be delegated to someone else on your team. For that task, we'd like you to answer the following. Who could take on this responsibility and why? What resources or support would they need to succeed? What risk might be involved? And how could you mitigate them? When thinking about these questions, I want you to understand that as a leader, it's our responsibility to delegate things, tasks to our subordinates, to our team, to help to improve them, allow them opportunity to grow. Okay. And so you want to find the right people for the right task, not just put anybody in any task. Okay. And then you want to make sure that you're providing them with the proper support to help them to be successful. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're letting them, all right, come to figure out for themselves, all right, how to mitigate problems and issues. Just be there to be the support. All right. So after these questions, I would like you to reflect on how delegating these tasks could strengthen trust within your team and free you to focus on higher priority leadership functions. So This activity should take no longer than 10 minutes, so please pause this presentation. Afterwards, return to the presentation. You may begin. Thank you for completing the activity. If you feel comfortable, please share your responses along with your feedback after the workshop. Jesus exemplifies relational leadership by serving, listening, and meeting others where they are. His actions inspire us to lead with humility, empathy, and love, fostering trust with those who we serve. In this picture, we can see that an individual is washing the feet of another. Jesus Christ, as an example of humility and of service to his disciples, washed their feet. And we have to understand that in first century AD, you had many people walking with sandals, very dusty, dirty areas, and it was a common practice that as you had guests enter the home, that either your servant or the wife of the house would wash the feet of those guests as a sign of care, right? And Jesus, wanting to show himself to be a relational leader, took the time to model this practice as a means to show himself as a servant. And I believe that as a relational leader, we have to see ourselves in this way. How are we being of to service to those that are entrusted to us? How do we care for them? And I mean, and he used such a powerful, image, of individuals' feet. All right. Most people, they don't want to deal with anybody's feet. All right. And even back, especially back then. But he took the time to show the importance of this and how we could use this as a means to be relational to the things and the people that we care for. We have reached our third and last activity of the workshop, the trust assessment. In this activity, we would like to evaluate how effective we are at signaling trust to others. We want to do this by taking the time to ponder the following questions and honestly consider. Do I frequently check in with my team about tasks? Why or why not? Do I share sufficient information with my team members about decisions? When someone makes a mistake, how do I typically react? Secondly, I want us to identify one area where we feel we could demonstrate more trust. This could be in giving team members more autonomy, being more transparent, or showing patience when mistakes happen. After considering these things and identifying these things, I would like you to create an action plan for improving in that area that you identify that should cover the next month. My belief and my thought and my hope is that by developing and putting forth an action of habit that will create change, and in creating change in how we trust our team, and then in turn our team begins to trust us a little bit better. So this activity, it should take a little bit longer than 10 minutes. So I'm going to say take about 15 minutes. Take about 15 minutes to go ahead and complete this activity. Please pause the presentation and return afterwards. You may begin. Thank you for completing this activity. I'm sure all of you developed excellent plans of action that are going to yield like extraordinary results. If you want to share what your action plan is, that's great. You don't have to. Just it means of having a conversation about it. If you share with me, I'll give you my insight. These are the Harvard Business Review articles that laid the foundation for this workshop. I wanted to share with you the most impactful quotes from each article. Peter Brigman's his article titled Best Leaders Aren't Afraid to Ask for Help. Our vulnerabilities make us most vulnerable when we pretend they don't exist. Acknowledging them is not only human, but a strength that fosters connection. When I read this, it reminded me of something I shared earlier in this presentation, and that's where Paul he shows or he explains that vulnerability isn't a weakness, but actually a strength and it's a strength that comes from the Lord. And so I thought that this fit very well where it was leading me within the building of this presentation, this workshop. Secondly, from authors Holly Brower, Scott Lester, and M. Kosgard, their article, which was titled, Want Your Employees to Trust You? Show You Trust Them. Employees who feel trusted are higher performers and exert extra effort, going above and beyond role expectations. Trust begets trust. And with this article, I really I think nested well with this presentation because the my whole focus in this workshop was wanting leaders to understand that as leaders we have to take the first approach in trusting individuals that we want to show trust to us, and the same goes for everything else. You want your team to respect you. Show some respect yourself. In the Army, we had a saying, lead from the front. And that means that we lead by example. I have to show. I do so that you can see what must be done. And so, being an emotional leader, being a relational leader, we want to consider those that we care for, those that are entrusted to us. We have to think about the team, and what we can best do to strengthen the team, to strengthen our members, because another saying we used to say in the Army is we're only as strong as our weakest link, and we want all our links to be strong. Emotional intelligence and trust are inseparable from relational leadership. As we embrace our humanity and lead with vulnerability, we create spaces where teams feel valued and inspired. Let's commit to small, consistent actions that build trust and reflects Christ's love in our leadership. So I would like to thank you for participating in this workshop. I pray that this workshop helped us as leaders to gain a better insight into our ability to lead emotionally, to lead as relational leaders, and that we see how Jesus Christ stood as a model of relational leadership, and that we can acknowledge. And if we can't, I mean, that's okay. But I hope that it gets you starting to think about how we could see Jesus Christ as modeling these attributes of emotional intelligence. So thank you so much again for taking part in this workshop, and I look forward to reading your feedback and growing as a leader because of it. Take care.